Okay. It says, with so many available options, how does one pinpoint the right one to use?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned before, it kind of depends on the business case of your game. It depends also like where is your game going to get released. If it's going to be a worldwide global release, or just going to start in the US or in Europe, because that choice restricts and opens up different options that you can use. So as we mentioned before, there's generally three options. You can go directly with a hyperscaler, you can go traditional with data centers and go full bare metal, or you go with a platform and there you go hybrid, and in the end your game might be running on multiple hyperscalers and bare metal providers in the back end. But what is sometimes forgotten is the hyperscalers we talk about are not present everywhere. Especially if you go towards countries such like Russia, or look at Southeast Asia, or Latin America, or even South Africa. Also the Middle East, I can keep going. There's a very mixed amount of where they are present and where they're not present. So if you talk about option one, you really need to take that into consideration, because games are not local to just US or Europe anymore, especially if you want to earn money from your gamers playing your game. So the first thing is look at where in the world your game is going to run and which party can provide you that. And I think 9 out of 10 cases you will end up with platforms such as us. You can go really deep into that, and you can put a lot of resources in researching that. But you could also go with platforms who have already done all the work for you, and that's where you and I come in.
And then there's also the mobile thing. If you would have a mobile game, it would be ideal if all of the players are on the same network. With 5G and internet networking, that's something that is becoming very real. If you would be hosting a game, like you could host your game within the Vodafone network, within the Vodafone Edge basically, and that will give you really low latency between and a really good connection between all the people that have Vodafone. And then you could do the same thing for any other provider, for instance. That could also be a choice. It also depends if you are developing a mobile game or a non-mobile game, like a PC game or something like that. But I always have the feeling that it's not the same for every game. It's basically you should be able to identify, to categorize a workload. So one of the attributes you could give it is like this is low latency is important. Maybe pricing is important. One game will make more money than the other game. You could even argue that if you have a paid version, that might give you better performance. I don't see why that wouldn't be possible. So you have all these attributes that make a game important, and based on those attributes, you should be able to make a decision, I think. And if I would be developing a game, I would basically split it in little pieces and put attributes on those little pieces. Like if you were downloading artifacts, you could do that from the other side of the world, because downloading an artifact is like a one-time thing. It's not gonna take a lot of time. But then again, if you would be in a fight, you need low latency for that. So that could be a process running, I don't know, in the edge of where your phone is connected to. I think, but it's a difficult decision. Or difficult. It's complicated. It's like you have a lot of variables. It's not as easy as picking the first one that shows up in your search results.
Definitely agree. That's also one of the pitfalls that a choice is made without taking everything into account. And then, as we mentioned before, you suddenly find yourself stuck in a situation you cannot get out of it. And
also, I think gaming is gaming is one of the industries where being better technically can make a difference between a success or not a success. Like if you're hosting a website and the latency is 30 milliseconds or it's 40, nobody cares. When it gets to a second, maybe people start complaining. But even then, there are a lot of people that say that your sales will drop when it goes above 300. All right. But that's 300 milliseconds, and now we're talking about gaming. If it's 40, that's a lot for shooters. And if it's like 100, the game is basically unplayable. So all this investment you did, and it's a lot of money that goes in there, a lot of years in developing. You can basically just throw your game away if the latency is too high.
Yeah, it basically means that whole countries might not be able to even play your game, even though it might be for sale.
You're missing out on an entire market.
You're missing out on a lot of market.
Yeah.
And also, what you mentioned, latency, for shooters it's crucial.
Yeah.
But especially now we're getting to a point where there's also some streaming going on, and maybe in the future more cloud-based streaming or hybrid streaming, so where parts of the game are streamed and parts are on the local computer.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be even lower latency than before. You need to be sub 30 milliseconds, or it's not going to be able to keep up, especially if you're trying to stream 8K to watch your computer. It needs a lot of processing power.
Yeah. Well, there are some locations that might have a little, some parts of the world just have their network is less good. So that won't be entirely consistent with, let's say, Europe, which is really good coverage of network. But it's pretty much, the consistency is also in the way you use it. So if you have one API that you can use for any part of the world, basically, and also any kind of hosting provider, so this is Edge, bare metal, cloud, whatever you name it, then that's also consistent. And also, of course, if you were hosting on Google Cloud or IGD maybe, it's the same interface towards it. So in that sense, it's absolutely consistent. As for the location in the world, you're always dependent on the region where you're at, on the physical things you have, on the infrastructure. Yeah.
I also see why platform like ours can do this probably better than if you would go with a single provider directly. As you mentioned, you would have a single API to talk to, and platform then arranges all the API calls and actions with different providers behind the platform, which can be cloud providers, other bare metal providers, you name it. That's one key thing, to be able to have the service available as close to the players as possible. Yeah. In Europe, with the internet infrastructure, I totally agree. You can maybe serve all of Europe with 2 locations. But if you're looking at even like at the US, there's a big difference between Central, East Coast, and West Coast. And if you look at the Middle East or Asia, with how these countries are interconnected, you need a lot more locations to be able to offer the same quality. And in my opinion, that's only possible if you use a platform service, which is not locked into a single provider of capacity.
When you say quality, you could be talking about latency, of course, but quality can also be in the price. If latency is not an issue, some games latency is not important at all, and in that case, price would be a factor for quality. And then if you go to Europe, you could still just have a better hosting location, better quality, but then in terms of pricing, or maybe maybe you need GPU or something like that. Or anything.
Yeah, it also depends on the needs of the game.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree that price can also be a very important factor. But it's also another reason why I think a platform service has an advantage, because you can play in the backend with multiple suppliers of capacity.
You can even experiment with
them. And experiment them and see which one works best. Maybe some might be cheaper.
Yeah.
But you might first think in terms of performance, it might be not so good, but you can test it because it's integrated in the platform. And you have the freedom to do it.
Or maybe you want to have maybe pricing is important. Pricing is always important, by the way. But maybe pricing is your main reason to pick a specific location in a specific area. But then when you have a tournament in that same area, you want to spend a little more just to be sure that all your players
tournament goes well. Yeah.
So you can even shift that on a day-to-day basis or hour-to-hour, basically on every time you start a match. The thing that is also consistent, if you use a platform, is that your distribution is basically solved. The distribution is usually another. It's the afterthought after the afterthoughts. Hosting is one thing, but then you also need to distribute it. Depending on your game, your binaries can
be very big as well.
Yeah, like 20 gigabytes is very not very common, but it's you see. So the distribution is also something that is absolutely consistent around the world and also across providers, and that's something to moving a lot of terabytes or gigabytes can be very expensive.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. I didn't initially think about that, but let's say as a game studio, and you make your own bucket of providers. It could be 10. But then you need to deploy your game on your patch. You need to work with all 10 providers individually to upload your builds, get everything patched, have different speeds, different contacts, different support teams. In the meantime, your testers are waiting for the new build to be deployed so they can actually test the game. Whereas if you work with a platform that takes care of everything behind that, you just upload your build to the platform, and the platform will take care of the distribution and can do it in a predictable way because they automated everything in the back end.
Yeah.
That's a very strong value.
And it's also, of course, billing, which is it's just
one negotiation, one billing.
Yeah, and then it's metrics, and then it's basically everything that has something to do with hosting is completely the same for any platform. If you have a proper platform.
So if you look at it, you basically have all the advantages of working with a single provider by using a platform, without the login if you were working with a provider directly without a platform.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And you're able to shift that. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that cost is definitely an important part. Probably one of the most important parts for game companies to decide where to host. But you also mentioned that, let's say when there's a tournament, you want to make sure everything works right, because that's a very important part of your game. It will get streamed to have a large audience, and of course in a competitive game, people want to make sure it works. So by using a platform, you can then make a choice to optimize based on latency. Take the Middle East, for example, where it's a very fragmented ecosystem in terms of connectivity. A lot of the connectivity between countries goes through Europe. So if you use a single cloud provider there, you cannot serve the neighboring countries for a competition match properly. So then you can say, okay, I want to pick a party there which does have the connections, which might be a little bit more expensive, but you have the total freedom to make these kind of decisions when using a platform. If you wish to optimize for latency, a platform is definitely the way to go.